This is an introduction to Pathfic Lecture 227, which is change from outer to inner laws in the New Age. And before I talk about this particular lecture, I want to talk about a couple of processes or a couple of things that were attached to this that happened alongside my preparation for this. First was that I have a sense that some lectures are going very deep into our global consciousness, into pathwork studies consciousness, into individual consciousness, meaning that last month, which was Pathwork Lecture 121 on some defensive tactics of substitution, displacement, and superimposition, after a few weeks, it started to really go into people and they started to get it and work with it. And they're still ruminating on it after a week of this lecture, that they're still ruminating on the previous one. Changing topics is not intended to change an individual's focus. The topics are meant to suggest, to enliven, to expand. But once you find a lecture that you like, that you're getting a lot out of, please stay there. However, I'm going to go on with topics. But what this did was it began to inform me, perhaps a little late in the game, that I could have spent another month on Pathwork Lecture 121. So as I was preparing this lecture, I realized we had 5 weeks in this cycle to catch up with the calendar date. So I expanded the topics from the normal 4 to 5, meaning that the weekly topics are ways that I sense into subtopics within the lecture and try to bring them out. I do edit and select and sometimes gather up references throughout the lecture to a specific subtopic so that they're corralled. I don't follow the lecture per se. And 227 felt so important that it felt like it needed more space than 4, but not enough for a two-parter. And then I got inspired to the following lecture, which I'm not going to get into right now, and realized that it was a two-parter. It did deserve 8 weeks. And so I began to see what people were experiencing of going deeper and wanting to spend more time. I began to see that in my process as well, wanting to spend more time with the different concepts. So again, follow your own interests. And if you'd like to take a look at 227, this is a little bit of an introduction. Now, the second thing is that I got caught. I am dyslexic. I tend to be very careful and work at it so it doesn't show up too often. But when it does, it goes right past my conscious mind. I don't see so-called mistakes. Once I see things backwards, they stay backwards. And what I did was I reversed the title of this lecture. And once I did it once in a rough draft, and I said I put the title as change from inner to outer laws. Once I did it once, I never noticed it again. I never had a reason to notice it again. So it cascaded into the study guide. It went on to my website. It went into the newsletters, all 5 of them. And until the first one went out, I didn't see it. And what this mimics is what's being discussed in the groups. And that is awareness. It seems to pop into consciousness as if it was a cork bobbing to the surface of liquid. You didn't see it before, and it's right in your face now. Once you see it, it's hard to believe that you didn't see it before. How dumb was I that I didn't notice this? All I can say is once I accepted it once, I just kept accepting it. And this is one of my experiences of coming into awareness. And part of what this lecture talks about is then you have to do the work. Awareness puts on a burden of responsibility. So I had to go back, change all the newsletters, change the study guide, change the website. I'm scrambling at this point until I finally decided to resend the initial week one because the mistake was so grievous that I just didn't want it to stand. And I thought through that mistake and I wondered why didn't I see it? Why did it make sense for me to say we're going to go from the inner to the outer laws? And the only explanation I could come up with, and I'm saying this with some humor because I was just curious, is that it almost felt like I skipped a step. This lecture is about changing from obeying outer structures to obeying an inner calling. And that has to come at a certain development period. We need the outer laws. We need them to support us. We need them to support our society, our civilization. They are handy. They work well. And at some point, we need to recognize that the inner is now becoming more and more developed and may be able to manifest, even though it doesn't have a structured place for it to automatically plug in. So why did I think that inner to outer was appropriate? That would be the next step. Once I develop my inner laws, then I would want to put them into the outer. I would want to manifest them in the laws of my land, the mores of my society, the way I interact with people, the way discussions are held. I would want to bring that awareness from the inside to the outside. But before I do that, and that's why I call it skipping a step, before I do that, I'm going to have to get my inner squared away. So the first step is to pay attention to the inner burgeoning, the inner awareness that you're getting about the changes that you want to make. Now, skipping a step happens to be one of the 9 principles of spiritual law that I included in the study guide. So for me, this is hysterical. This is like I just got the pieces reversed. You can't skip a step. So that's all I can say about that little dyslexic whoop-de-doo. So let's go to Patrick Lecture 227. The first subtopic was about growth is an organic process. And incidentally, I mistyped that also because I changed the title and then didn't go back and pick up the newsletter. But that just adds to the comedy of some months are error prone. So growth as an organic process, meaning that there needs to be a vision about the growth process. This follows Patrick Lecture 210, the process of visualization, which talks about how you really need some visualization in order to be able to condense your thoughts, your thinking process to develop the idea. We don't manifest in a vacuum. You may not recognize what that visualization process was. And as we become adults, it's a more subtle process than it was when we were children. So I find it really useful to remind people of the developmental process we went through as children because it was fairly simplistic, black and white, easily identifiable. You can carve it into stages versus adult development, which is far more subtle and intermixed and not so easy to subdivide. So visualization as a child. I'm sure that a child could be raised alone in a forest and learn a lot of things and develop itself to some extent. But optimal development of a child is that they have other people around them. Parents, caregivers, siblings, relatives, friends, people on the street. So a child, even as an infant, sees people standing up. They see them walking. They see them reaching. They see things being handed to them And while they're flailing their hand around, trying to figure out how to work those muscles, how to do the hand-eye coordination, uh, they have a model. Now, it's not scientific, it's observation. They see a pattern of activity. They mimic it, and because it's human activity and they're human, works pretty well. So we observe, we experiment, and then later we observe emotional and intellectual interactions. And we can go through those visualizations in a quieter place in our heads, but we would still be visualizing and experimenting, and then bringing them to manifest. And the idea is we don't manifest perfectly the first time around. As children, there's more tolerance for that. As adults, it's very common not to have any tolerance whatsoever for floundering, for experimentation, for exploration. And yet there isn't anything that humanity has done where people did it right the first time. It's the definition of exploration that you don't know what you're doing. That's why it's called exploration. But on an individual level, we don't seem to give ourselves permission for that. It winds up being all or nothing. So we hold ourselves back, waiting to be perfect whenever we do it, or we hide, mask, lie to cover up our attempts until we have something that we are willing to admit to. So this is the visualization process of growth. Now, this lecture spends a fair amount of time talking about a seed plan. And I love the analogy of that. But it's a little bit different for humans. And it has to be spoken of a little differently than just an apple seed grows an apple tree and an acorn grows an oak tree. Spiritually, we got to go before the seed ever existed. So spiritually, before we were born on this planet, the pathwork talks about that we have a seed plan. There was a reason we got born in the first place. I tease about a mantra from my generation in the 50s and 60s, which was, I did not ask to be born. I found it very humorous that when I began studying pathwork in my 40s, I had to eat those words. That pathwork was teaching me, yes, I did. I did ask to be born. I lined up, I went through the bureaucratic, clerical process of submitting my task and getting help and working out the details until I was authorized to come down. I'm using those words because I don't know the spiritual words. It's as close as I'm able to come, lifting it off the page and talking about it in a way I can understand it. So we have a seed plan, and to get that seed plan done, we come up with details to support that seed plan. I tease a lot about the fact that I'm very small. As I get older, I'm getting shorter, and I'm now 4'11". And so I was never 6 feet tall, but at least I was over 5 feet. But that still leaves me on the low end of my generation of people around me. I'm on the shorter side. And that influences how people see and perceive me. They see and perceive 6 foot tall Amazonian people as different than they do small people. They see blondes and brunettes differently. They see men and women differently. And those differences are reflected back to us. They are our mirrors. And we take our own interpretations for that. So that the qualities I'm born with are going to influence how I develop. They're going to influence how I interact, how I'm perceived. And then my false beliefs are going to influence how I interpret those false beliefs. So visualization is essential for growth and development. There is a seed plan. The seed plan is not a contract that must be followed at all costs. And that's what the term organic enters into this lecture. Organic here is referring to organic life. Organic life is in constant motion, and constant growth. If you are not in growth, you are dying. If your cells are not regenerating, then the number that are dying are going to kill you as an organism. You must constantly replenish yourself. That is organic life. Even sitting still for a while, it's something I use to emphasize a point in meetings, is you think you're sitting still, but you're not. There's always micro movements. If nothing else, you're breathing. And as you breathe, you're moving your abdomen in and out, which is helping to flush the blood back and forth. When you get tired or sore, your body says, please shift positions, and you move. One of the jokes in groups is when you start yawning, and yawning was universally interpreted as you're bored or you're tired. The discovery has been that yawning is the way the body says, please give me more oxygen. I'm fading here. I need a cup of coffee. I need something to revitalize me. So that yawning can be a way where we're trying to pay attention, and we need more stimulus, internal stimulus, to enable that. That urge to yawn is the body saying more, shift, change. This is organic life. Take that analogy from a biological level and expand it to intellectual, emotional. Organic intellectual life does not sit still. Organic emotional life does not sit still. We are always in growth. Now, we may not be growing according to the way the conscious ego mind anticipates. So the conscious ego mind, like a schoolmaster, you're not growing that fast. You're not growing at all. That's not accurate. It means there's a discrepancy between the desire, and let's call that a vision of what is possible, and the actual action. But there's always going to be a discrepancy between those two. So that's kind of what this section of the lecture that I collected is about. That growth is constant adaptation, that there will always be a discrepancy. It's not a bad thing, it just is. And there's an encouragement to be loving and accepting of the fact that we have these visions and we're working towards it. And if you want to speed up, then you may need to do various things to speed up your development. But development requires awareness, and awareness, once again included in this particular section, is a quote from Patrick Lecture 127. Awareness is the longest and most painful stage. Awareness tells you what you haven't done. So I'm going to hark back to, I had a moment of awareness and realized I had misprinted, mistyped everything. And in that moment, I knew how much work I was going to have to put in, hour to 2 hours, to fix the mistake. So the awareness told me what was, and then it's up to me whether I say nobody will notice. I could have let it go. 1 or 2 people might have noticed. That's not me. And of course, it would be important not to misrepresent the lectures if you're trying to teach them. So awareness brings the burden of responsibility. Now I am aware, and now I need to act on that awareness. I need to be in integrity with what I now understand. Before you have the awareness, there's nothing you can do. So you do have to wait for the awareness. It's good to have feedback from other people. They can hasten that process. It's not pleasant to have somebody else tell you that you've made a number of mistakes, but so be it. That's your information. That's your awareness. And then you bring it to yourself, and then you find out the truth about yourself, whether you're willing to act on the information or whether you're trying to dodge it and find an excuse. This is all the inner work. all this work must be done before you can present any possible outer framework for other people. And that's why changing from inner to outer is way ahead of where we are. Right now, we're changing from the outer to the inner, and that's going to take a while. Now, there was some comments in the last two meetings on how this is taking a long time and it's frustrating and discouraging. And that may be true. And I found some examples, historical examples, of where, let us say, I'm going to exaggerate the example. It was an article on diplomacy, and it said, we've been doing it this way for thousands of years. Allegiance was to the ruler, the authority figure, the god. Then, according to this essay, give or take around the mid 1700s, there was a shift in thinking where the allegiance became to a body of people, the state. It became more broad-based, more stable than who was sitting on the throne or who had the power. And that was only, give or take, 400 years ago. The article was encouraging planetary diplomacy, planetary governance. And all it was saying was it took us 400 years in the last phase, and we need to shift. And it's not an overnight thing. But it also gave some examples. And it's very easy to ignore examples of where we are trying to do the right thing for the planet, for each other, because so much other stuff is going on. And this becomes a matter of what you choose to be inspired by, or what you choose to allow to discourage you, which would allow you to not grow, not develop, and not work towards a better future for all of us. So perhaps you can see why the lecture itself excited me, and there's 4 other sections to talk about. Thanks for listening. Take care.